there is a moment that comes to everyone. A moment when you are facing opposition, when someone is challenging you, attacking your position, questioning your authority, or simply trying to dominate you through force of personality or aggression. In that moment, most people crack. They become defensive, they lose their composure, they react emotionally, they reveal their weakness, and in that revelation they lose whatever power they had. The confrontation is over before it truly began, not because their opponent was stronger, but because they defeated themselves through their own emotional reactivity. But there is another way, a way that Machiavelli understood deeply and wrote about in his observations of power, politics, and human nature. A way that allows you to remain completely unshaken no matter what force comes at you. No matter how aggressive the opposition, no matter how personal the attack. This is not about being cold or uncaring. This is not about suppressing your emotions or pretending to be a robot. This is about understanding the true nature of confrontation and developing an internal state that cannot be disturbed by external pressure. If you have ever walked away from a confrontation feeling defeated, feeling like you said the wrong things or reacted in ways you regret, feeling like you lost control of yourself and therefore lost the encounter, then what I am about to share will transform how you show up in every challenging situation for the rest of your life. This is Machiavelli's lesson on remaining unshaken, adapted not for princes ruling kingdoms, but for anyone navigating the inevitable conflicts and confrontations of human existence. Before we go deeper into this lesson that could change how you handle every difficult interaction, if you recognize the importance of remaining unshaken in confrontation, if you want to develop this kind of inner stability, leave your like on this video, subscribe to the channel for more lessons on power, presence, and mastery. And in the comments, tell me, what confrontation shook you? When did you lose your composure and wish you had stayed calm? Share your experience. Now, let me reveal how to remain unshaken. The first principle Machiavelli understood is that he who reacts first loses. In any confrontation, there is a battle happening on two levels simultaneously. There is the surface level, the content, what the confrontation is supposedly about. And there is the deeper level, the battle for emotional control, for who will maintain their composure and who will break. And this deeper battle is the real game. The person who can make the other person react emotionally, who can disturb their opponent's equilibrium, who can pull them out of their center, has already won regardless of what happens on the surface level. Think about it. When someone attacks you verbally, when they criticize you harshly, when they come at you with aggression or accusations, what is the immediate impulse? To defend yourself, to explain, to counterattack, to prove them wrong, to justify your position. This impulse is natural, instinctive, hardwired into us. But it is also a trap, because the moment you react defensively, the moment you take the bait and start explaining or defending or attacking back, you have lost your power. Why? Because you have let them control your emotional state. You have allowed their attack to determine your response. You have become reactive rather than responsive, moved by their energy rather than grounded in your own. And once you are in reactive mode, once your emotions are driving your behavior, you cannot think clearly, you cannot respond strategically, you cannot access your full intelligence and presence. You are operating from your most primitive instincts, fight or flight, and in that state you are easily manipulated and controlled. Diego, 24 de noviembre de 2025 las 2:01 de la tarde. Machiavelli observed this pattern again and again in political conflicts. The leader who could remain calm while his opponents became agitated, who could stay centered while others lost their composure, who could wait while others rushed into reaction, that leader almost always prevailed. Not because he was stronger or smarter necessarily, but because he maintained control of himself while his opponents lost control of themselves. So the first lesson is this: when confronted, do not react immediately. Pause, breathe, create space between the stimulus and your response. This pause is everything. It is the difference between being a puppet whose strings are pulled by others and being a sovereign individual who chooses their own responses. In that pause, that moment of non-reaction, you maintain your power. You stay in control. You remain unshaken. The second principle is that emotion is information, not instruction. When you are confronted, when someone attacks or challenges you, emotions arise. This is natural and unavoidable. You might feel anger, fear, hurt, indignation, defensiveness. These emotions are not the problem. The problem is when you mistake these emotions for instructions on how to behave. When you feel anger and immediately express it. When you feel fear and immediately flee. when you feel hurt and immediately lash out or withdraw. Machiavelli understood that the skilled navigator of human affairs must be able to feel emotions without being controlled by them. Emotions are data. They are information about the situation and about your own internal state. Anger tells you that a boundary has been crossed. Fear tells you that there is a perceived threat. Hurt tells you that something matters to you. But none of these emotions tell you what you should do in response. That requires thinking, strategy, wisdom. The unshaken person feels their emotions fully but does not act from them automatically. They notice the anger arising and think, "Interesting, I am feeling angry right now. What is this anger telling me? What does it reveal about the situation?" And then, from a place of awareness rather than reactivity, they choose how to respond. Maybe the situation calls for expressing the anger clearly and firmly. Maybe it calls for walking away. Maybe it calls for something else entirely. Challenges would increase. Opposition would grow bolder. The appearance of strength, even when the reality was more complicated, was essential for maintaining power and stability. The person who can do this, who can project calm strength regardless of what they feel inside, has an enormous advantage in any confrontation. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive lesson, but it is also one of the most powerful. In confrontation, this principle manifests as detachment. Not detachment in the sense of not caring about anything, but detachment in the sense of not being desperate for any particular outcome. You state your position clearly. You hold your boundaries firmly, but you are not attached to changing the other person's mind. You are not invested in winning the argument. You are not desperate for their approval or agreement. And this detachment gives you tremendous power because you cannot be emotionally manipulated. You cannot be pressured into backing down because you are not afraid of the confrontation ending without resolution. The person who must win will do desperate things to win, will compromise themselves, will react emotionally, will make mistakes. The person who can accept any outcome, who is equally comfortable with agreement or disagreement, with resolution or continued conflict, remains centered and powerful throughout. This is the paradox. Care less, control more, release the outcome, increase your influence. Diego, 24 de noviembre de 2025 las 2:01 de la tarde. The fifth principle is that silence is a weapon. In confrontation, most people feel compelled to fill every silence, to answer every accusation, to respond to every challenge immediately. But Machiavelli understood that silence, strategically deployed, is one of the most powerful responses available. Silence creates discomfort. It puts pressure on the other person. It forces them to continue speaking, often revealing more than they intended. It demonstrates that you are unmoved by their attack, that their words have not disturbed you enough to warrant an immediate response. When someone attacks you verbally and you simply remain silent, looking at them calmly, you create a kind of psychological pressure that is almost unbearable for the other person. They expected a reaction, they expected defense or counterattack. They expected you to do something to relieve the tension their attack created, but instead, you give them nothing. You remain still. You hold the silence, and in that silence, their attack loses power. It falls into a void rather than bouncing back off your defense. Moreover, silence gives you time to think, time to feel your emotions without acting on them, time to assess the situation strategically, time to choose a response rather than reacting while they are speaking, perhaps escalating their attack because your silence is making them uncomfortable. You are observing, analyzing, deciding what move to make if any move is needed at all. The key is that your silence must come from a place of strength, not fear. But the silence of someone who simply chooses not to waste words on something beneath their dignity. This kind of silence communicates more powerfully than any verbal response could. It says, "You do not move me." And that message, delivered through silence, is devastating to someone who was trying to throw you off balance. In confrontation, your physical presence, your body language, your tone, your energy, all communicate more powerfully than the content of your words. This means breathing deeply and steadily, keeping your body relaxed but alert, maintaining open and confident posture, speaking from a calm and grounded place, holding steady eye contact without staring aggressively. These physical elements communicate strength and stability at a level deeper than words. At the level of primal assessment that humans make instantaneously when evaluating whether someone is a threat or can be dominated. Think about the people you have encountered who had real presence, who commanded respect simply by how they carried themselves. They did not have to shout or threaten or prove anything. Their physical bearing communicated that they were solid, grounded, not to be trifled with. This is not about size or physical strength. Some of the most powerful presences come from relatively small people. It is about internal state expressed through the body. It is about being so centered, so rooted, so unshakable internally that it radiates outward through every gesture and expression. The eighth and final principle is that true unshakability comes from knowing yourself completely. This is the foundation beneath all the other principles. You cannot remain unshaken in confrontation if you do not know who you are, what you stand for, what your boundaries are, what you value. Because if you do not know these things, then every attack, every challenge, every criticism will shake you because you have no solid ground to stand on. Machiavelli wrote about the importance of a leader knowing himself, understanding his own nature, his strengths, his weaknesses, his limits, because only from this self-knowledge could a leader make wise strategic decisions. Could he know when to be bold and when to be cautious, when to fight and when to negotiate. It means getting clear on your values, your boundaries, your non-negotiables. It means developing such a strong sense of self that external opinions, even harsh ones, cannot destabilize you. It means building your identity on something internal and solid, rather than on external validation or others' perceptions. And once you develop this capacity, once you become someone who cannot be shaken in confrontation, everything changes. You move through conflicts differently. You negotiate from strength. You hold your boundaries without aggression. You speak your truth without desperation. You become someone that others instinctively respect because they sense, even if they cannot articulate it, that you are rooted in something solid, something that their attacks and challenges cannot touch. This is Machiavelli's gift to us. Not rules for manipulation or domination, but wisdom about how to remain sovereign in yourself regardless of what external forces come against you. Use it wisely, practice it daily, and watch how confrontations transform when you meet them from a place of genuine unshakability.